All right, folks, welcome to the March edition of the ASPEC podcast. Today, we're going to be chatting about chosen family here with Spades. I'm Tai Iwai, PhD candidate and Aero ASPEC non-binary content creator by night, very interested in understanding, the lived experiences of asexuality and aromanticism, and that's the main focus of the podcast. And so, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Spades to introduce themselves. They're getting rated. Welcome on in, Laura. Do you want to introduce yourself, Spades?
Hi, everyone. I go by Spades or Natty, doesn't matter. And I am queer, bisexual, biromantic, also demisexual and demiromantic, as well as a relationship anarchist and solo polyamorous. I probably missed a few in there. Non-binary. Yeah. So, and I'm very excited to be here on the ASPEC podcast to talk about chosen family. Yay.
Thank you so much again for joining us, and a warm welcome also to Lore Curator. Thank you so much for raiding on in and bringing your community. I know that you just finished a long co-working stream, so if you do need to raid and take a break and fade, I totally understand. But so happy that you could join us. Thank you so much. So I guess the first thought I had, the first question we're going to talk about is chosen family and, what it means, and just remind folks that we just had Chosen Family Day here on February 22nd, and Chosen Family Day celebrates the many intentional relationships in which we have to provide supports in times of need and enrich our lives. And for many of us in the broader 2S LGBTQIA plus community, chosen family is so incredibly important. Yet many of these relationships are not formally recognized by the law and by government. And we talked in depth about, the fact that there are so many relationships and relationship structures out there which are not recognized as legal relationships, thanks to amatonormative power structures that we have in society. And we'll be definitely revisiting again the term amatonormativity. But the first sort of question I have here is, what does the term chosen family mean for you?
Yeah, so this is, a very exciting topic for me. And I just want to start off with a disclaimer that I'm just one person. I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm just, speaking from my perspective. So for other people, they might define chosen family differently, and that's okay. I think the main commonality here is the word chosen. So, as opposed to your family of origin that you grew up with and you had no choice, chosen family are people that you intentionally agree to be in your life and to support each other, and to be in each other's lives. Also, there's found family too, which is a similar term. And this can be, I like the term chosen family after years and years of trying to label my relationships and think about what fits and doesn't fit. I just found many of the labels to be kind of limiting in one way or another. So chosen family is kind of very broad to me. It can encompass platonic, romantic, sexual relationships of all kinds. It can even be, sort of like mentorship type relationships and like family, like mother father figures, that kind of thing. Like it can encompass all that too, and it can include exes or people that are not easily labeled and usually have like different connotations. So I just like chosen family because it's just people that are important to you, that you mutually agree to be in each other's lives, ideally for life, and support each other mutually. So that's kind of where I'm at with the definition.
Perfect. Really great definition. And as Spade said, there's no one way to define, what chosen family means for you. And we're just, here talking about our own experiences, but very much, it's the folks that you choose to have in your life, other than, different from, the folks that you may have, the family you may have been born into versus the folks you choose to incorporate into your life.
And I just wanted to add to that, for many queer people, it's extra important to have chosen family, because maybe your family of origin doesn't accept you, or you don't feel safe with them, or even you become estranged from. So it's extra important to have that support from the people you choose to be in your life as well.
Absolutely. So, so incredibly important for so many of us in the broader 2S LGBTQIA plus community, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of building on this a little bit, are you able to comment on the ways in which amatonormativity impacts your chosen family?
Sure. I'll start with kind of a more like specific, or I guess personal example. Um, in with people that I'm not very close to, or like extended family, blood family. Uh, you know, there's a lot of kind of confusion sometimes with people asking like, oh, well, like, who are you gonna marry? Who are you gonna have kids with? And it's like, well, actually, that's not in my plans. Nobody, but then like there's this assumption that like, oh, you'll find the right person one day, like you'll change your mind. There's always that aspect of amatonormativity creeping in, and it's like, well, what about the relationships I do have? Are they not important? Like, are they not enough? For me they are, but in the minds of many people, I'm still, it's um, not not good enough. Like, I need to find that one person to marry. So, and then on a more structural or systemic level, there's many different aspects of how amatonormativity affects these types of relationships. Like marriage gives a lot of benefits. For example, if you have a job that has health benefits, then your spouse might be eligible for them, but people in your chosen family are not. Or if on taxes, there's tax breaks for married couples, and if you say were to pass away, like who your estate or things go to by default, all these kinds of things that amatonormative relationships and marriages benefit from, that chosen family just doesn't have access to. And as someone without health benefits myself, like, I'm on my own. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, another aspect that we chatted about during the last podcast that often comes up in the context of amatonormativity is who is seen to be a legal caregiver for you, and, who is allowed to come visit you, at the hospital or other places. You're often not allowed to be visited outside, folks, outside your immediate, biological family, so to speak, or somebody that you're married to.
Your family, yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
I've heard of that as well. Mhm.
So amatonormativity impacts us on so many different levels. And we had a really great and very detailed discussion of amatonormativity in episode 41 in February, which we collaborated with the Aromantic Union for Recognition, Education, and Advocacy, or ORIA, on. And I've linked that particular episode in, I'll link that in the chat here in a moment. But as we do that,
Yeah, I also forgot to mention too the I mean, I'm sure people viewing this are already aware of it, but just in case, like the definition of amatonormativity, the way I see it is like the assumption that everybody wants or is looking for, you know, that one singular person that is romantic, sexual, you live together, you know, merge lives, and you know everyone's looking for that, and people without that you know are missing something in life, so, or you know, wanting that. So it's just that assumption, and it's not true. You know, a lot of people thrive more outside of those types of relationships, and that is totally fine. So I forgot to mention that in my answer because I sped through it.
no worries. I linked a term earlier, or I linked a little message that talked about kind of Elizabeth Brake's original definition. And as you mentioned, it's the assumption that everyone desires to be in a coupled, romantic, monogamous relationship. And not only that, that the coupled, monogamous, romantic relationships are inherently the most important relationship of them all.
Right. Yes. That that little assumption there. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I'm just linking the episode here if folks want to check that out a little bit later.
Definitely do check it out. I watched the whole thing and it was really interesting.
Yeah, we got into some really interesting discussions and talked about it from so many different perspectives. So, you know, there's a lot to talk about, and you know, that's why this is a term and this is a topic that we just keep coming back to over and over again.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Forrest Demlin Reeds mentioned, I started feeling this, you know, more whole and fulfilled after I figured out I was Aroace. Um, but definitely, you know, amatonormativity refuses to accept the fact that not everybody wants to be in a coupled monogamous romantic relationship, and that, you know, romance is not the be all and end all of relationships.
Mhm. Yeah, as I was coming up with like the term chosen family for myself, like I had tried different labels like inner circle, which was great, or you know, QPRs, queer platonic relationships, platonic partners. I even came up with a term with one of my QPRs called committed friendship. So like all these terms exist, but then they're not all encompassing of what a chosen family is exactly. So in the end, I just stick with that. It's it's simpler, and it can include, you know, all types of relationships.
That's a really good point. I really like that fact that you choose to use a much more all-encompassing term. And for folks that may not be aware, a QPR, or queer platonic relationship or partnership, sometimes known as quasi-platonic partnership, refers to relationships which do not fit the traditional mold or the traditional models of purely platonic and purely romantic. There is no one way to be in a QPR. However, if one had to try to explain, you know, how they're different from a traditional platonic or purely romantic relationship, they often, but not always, include a greater degree of emotional intimacy than one would typically associate with a platonic friendship, at least in a Western North American concept, and may include other aspects such as cohabitation, or things like hand-holding, physical intimacy that would not necessarily be seen as part of a platonic relationship, at least in, North America from a Western lens. But there's no one way to have a QPR, and there's quite a few different episodes where we chatted about QPRs in greater detail. So feel free to type exclamation point QPR or QPR2 if you want to learn more. I have all these things as commands now because we use these terms so often, but not everybody tuning in on any given episode may necessarily be familiar with all the terminology. So it's easier just to put that in as a command. So I have like 20 different terminology commands at this point for the podcast.
Hey, that makes sense if it's commonly used words, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of coming back to this, broader term community, it's something that many of us in ASPEC spaces, including myself, can really resonate with. What does community mean for you?
Oh boy, I can talk this forever, but I'll try to keep it brief. Yeah, community is something that's super important to me and hopefully others. But the way I see community is like if your chosen family is like your kind of like your immediate family, then your community is kind of like your extended family. That's kind of how I see it. And again, disclaimer, it can mean very different things for different people. Sometimes they're more tight-knit communities. Sometimes it's more loose and maybe, you interact rarely. But also communities can be online or in person or hybrid. And all are valid and, very helpful for some people. And for me, as I consider myself a community builder, I have online communities as well as in-person ones that I try to cultivate. And, generally speaking, a community shares something in common. It might be an interest, it might be a shared experience or struggle, it might be an identity or some other factor. But furthermore, for me, community is a step up from that also. So it's like a group of people that supports each other in whatever ways they're able to. So if one person is struggling with something or has a crisis or some sort of issue, then people can step up according to what they're able to provide and help out with, or different skills or that kind of thing. So nobody's left completely alone to fend for themselves. And it's really great. It's like a mutual support network in a way, as well as just a place to check in and chat and have like a consistency in your life. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I know many of the communities that I'm in, mutual aid and mutual support are so, so incredibly important. I'm in a number of online spaces with a number of both queer and disabled folks, and providing that mutual aid during, really tough times is just so, so, so important.
Yeah, for sure. I do. I will touch on that a little bit later as well. But yeah, it's great. It can be like, from the smallest things, like, who knows some info about this trans issue, or to all the way up to like, hey, I need a couch to crash on because I got kicked out of my house. Like, yeah, all across the board, different ways of helping one another and mutual aid. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can definitely resonate on, being a community builder to, varying degrees myself. Locally here, I run a Aces and Arrows support group, which has been a huge joy and a a huge honor for me to have had the opportunity to run for the last, gosh, it's coming up to 3.5 years now.
Mhm.
And I would see Twitch and the communities that I've come to be a part of here on Twitch as obviously communities in themselves, and creating these sorts of spaces to have these important discussions is really important for me. So I can certainly see the community building aspect is something that I really really enjoy myself as well.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that's another aspect too of just a place to share things that you might not be able to with whoever your coworkers or your blood family or and just emotional support and things like that as well. And um, yeah, so many different awesome benefits of community.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is such a huge topic. I think, community could be its own podcast episode unto itself because there's so much here to talk about. So this is just a
And it's not
little,
all
yeah,
it's not all serious either. Like, you can
no,
game together, you can watch movies
yeah,
together. Like that's
yeah.
totally part of it.
There's so many things we can talk about with regards to community. So that's why I was thinking like that in itself could be a whole entire episode for sure.
Hmm.
Oh, heck yeah. Dune Stars said, I can say Spades has built communities are fantastic.
Aw.
Aw,
Dune is part of my chosen family.
aw.
I didn't realize
Welcome.
they were watching.
Welcome, Dune Stars. It's really lovely to have you here today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and chatting.
Mm. Yeah, the way I have my screen set up, I can't see who's in the Twitch, so yeah,
No worries.
the shout out.
Yeah, really good topic. I've been excited about chatting about this because it's not something that we've had the opportunity to chat about specifically on the podcast before. We've talked about, amount of normativity. We've talked about, specific things like queer platonic partnerships, but we haven't really had a more general discussion about chosen family or community in that sense before.
Well, one thing I guess I can mention too on this topic is how important community is for people. Like, not everyone who is aromantic is single, of course, but not. But at the same time, people who are single or whatever word you want to use, we'll get into that later. Often uh, struggle more with certain aspects of life where it's just assumed that you have someone there to help you out like by default. So community is extra important, and it's extra important for people who are in more primary style or like cohabiting or nesting types of relationships to reach out to their friends who aren't and to just check in on them. And community is extra good for that as well. Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You brought that point up exactly. And, as somebody who is, aromantic myself, it's these communities that mean so very much to me. And, this is a good kind of segue into our next question, which is a term that I've thought about a lot as somebody who's aromantic myself. And that term is the word single. You see that a lot on, official government documents. It's on your tax forms. You have to declare whether you're single or you're married. And as somebody that's aromantic, what does
Mhm.
the term single mean for me? Because the way that I see it in terms of the tax document is that, or at least I personally see it as a notice to society that I'm still looking for that eventual partner. Though, I
Mhm.
guess you could make that argument that a partner doesn't have to be the romantic one, and somebody who experiences altruist attraction, for example, I could see myself down the road perhaps being in a queer platonic partnership. And does that then, bring me into the world of not single? I don't know. From the government's perspective, technically you're not in a legal relationship, but from my perspective, that's certainly different than not being in any kind of relationship. So this is a term I've really struggled a lot with as an aromantic person.
Yeah, I I definitely have some things to say on that as well. I guess, in a matter-normative capitalistic society, like it's very for people who do follow that model, it's very straightforward. Like, this is single, this is married, this is common law, this is separated. Like, it's unambiguous. But for the rest of us who don't fit into that standard template, I guess, it can get very complicated. And just because someone is single, again, like you said, doesn't mean they are looking for anybody. And at the same time, someone can have multiple close, intimate, loving relationships or chosen family or what have you, and then but in the eyes of society, they're still single. And it's like, really? Like, all these people, they mean absolutely nothing. Like, so it is, yeah, it can be very frustrating. And there's no good word to like distinguish these types of situations. I know in the polyamorous community, we do have the word solo, which I like, but it definitely hasn't caught on to the rest of society. You can be solo, which means you're, typically unmarried or not common law, but you can have multiple partnerships. In the case of polyamory, it's romantic, but they don't have to be. So there's just not a good word for that sort of situation, and there's not a good word for like happily single and not wanting to change that either. So I've heard like self-partnered and things like that, but everyone's like, oh, you're just saying that. So I kind of brush it off. So yeah, we really need kind of more vocabulary, I think, around that, and around being there's different arrangements. I have heard of one called living apart together. It is kind of mononormative, I think. It's like when a couple lives separately but they're together. So yeah, slowly, eventually we're might be getting there, but the moment it's can be a little frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to circle back to a couple of things mentioned here in the chat. Lore Curator mentioned that community building is something that means a lot to them, and they would not be where they are now without the support from the many, many communities that have uplifted them and their chosen family. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And with regards to myself as well. And Forrest Themlin Reeds mentioned, totally get that. I honestly consider every member of my circle and communities to be a form of relationship. To me, absolutely, 100% it is. And it's always odd remembering that relationship in the eyes of capitalistic amount-normative society is generally reserved to be one thing and one thing only, and that's the romantic partnership. Their therapist always said that your relationship with yourself is just as valid as any other people, and they've absolutely come to wholeheartedly love that, and I would agree.
Yep.
For sure.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that term single has always been frustrating for me. So, you brought up some really good points, as have several folks in the chat here.
Yeah, and it's you're the only person that you're with for your whole life. So,
Mm-hmm.
your relationship with yourself is extremely important. For sure. Very good points.
Absolutely. Laura said, I moved 3 hours away from people I consider to be my chosen family to start my PhD, and that was devastating in so many ways that cannot be understood within, an meta-normative context. Absolutely, and I can certainly relate, having moved the whole way across the country from the West Coast out here to work on my PhD. So absolutely can relate on that. And Joe Cubstar you mentioned being both, disabled and having participated with mutual aid and support networks.
Oh,
The Joe mentioned as both physically and a mentally disabled person. I'm so extremely grateful for various communities that I'm a part of. I as well, the reason I wear these purple clip-ons, they're not sunglasses, they're actually Noir 81 shade, is because I have screen sensitivity, and if it weren't for things like these purple clip-ons, I couldn't be doing and looking at the screen as we are today. So having these sorts of communities where folks understand that, hey, some days I just can't look at the screen for very long, and I don't want to participate in capitalism today. Well, I mean, let's be honest, do I ever want to participate in it? Probably not, but well, there's definitely some days where I'm less able to than others, and having those support networks where folks actually understand and will not judge you for that is so incredibly important.
for sure. Oh, I totally relate on the. I don't have your type of glasses, but when I have migraines, I use sunglasses because
Yeah.
it's just everything hurts so bright. Yeah. Um,
And Dune Stars mentioned they also uh, did that and moved back after 3 years because fuck isolation. Absolutely. Totally understand that one. So another term, that's I think tricky for many of us, who are aerospec, or in other communities like polyamorous, perhaps, is the term plus one, because it has, under a meta-normative context, a very specific meaning, and one that I don't necessarily feel comfortable adhering to. But I also recognize that's my own experience, that's my own lived experience, and not necessarily true for all aerospec folks. And I want to hear what your thoughts are around the term plus one.
yeah. Yeah, this one's a little trickier because I think everyone's experience is a little different with that. Um, but yeah, I can speak from my own experience. I think the assumption generally with plus ones is that it's a romantic partner of some sort, and I I think it's important to like there's different ways around isolating people who maybe don't have a plus one or maybe they have a plus two. Like there's different ways around it. Something I do when I host events is I just put a little note like, hey, you're free to bring people to this. Just let me know who it is. And sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's two. Like, I don't have a specific number. I'm just like, hey, just let me know who you're bringing, just so I know what to expect and who that is. And yeah, like, or ideally, I'll just invite them directly. So that's another thing another way to sort of avoid the issue is just ask, your attendee, like, hey, who would you like to bring? I'll invite them. Something like just a little gesture like that goes a long way. And, sometimes you, even if you have a partner, like a friend of yours might be more interested in that event. They might have more fun there or, it'd be more suitable for them. So it's great to have that option, and it's great to reach out to attendees just to check in, like, hey, do you want to bring anyone? Like, you can bring whoever you want, you can bring your mom. Yeah, because it's I guess the default assumption is that you're bringing a romantic partner, and then I haven't personally experienced this, but maybe some hosts would be upset if you brought somebody else, or they'd be like, wait, where's so and so? Like, I thought they're coming, and it's like, well, you didn't invite them, or sorry, my throat is a little dry.
No worries.
But yeah, where was I? So plus ones. Yeah, and I understand sometimes there's a limitation on like the number of people you can invite. The guest list, like if it's a wedding, it's like you have a specific number of seats or whatever. And that's fine, but just it's always good to be mindful of your wording and your inclusivity of people, and yeah, just reaching out to attendees goes a long way, or giving them that option of, hey, reach out to me if you want to bring someone, or and I personally like direct invites. Like if I say, oh, like I would really like so and so to come, I'd much rather the host invite them directly then, as opposed to me just dragging them along, because it's again, there's this assumption like, oh, like who's that? Is that your date? Like, I don't know. I probably missed some points there, but
Oh, you brought up so many awesome points, and kind of circling back to that one, point you made about, the assumption normally is that it's, the plus one is a romantic partner. And from a metanormative context, we generally assume that that one romantic partner is going to want to do everything and live their entire life with you, and that there's no separation of you two. And so whatever you do, your romantic partner, therefore, inevitably will be coming along.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I have experienced that. I do have romantic relationships as well. And one time, well, maybe more than one time, but there's one time where a partner of mine like went to an event, and people were like, where's Spades? And they're like, huh? Like, you didn't invite them. What do you mean, where's Spades? Like, I don't know where they are. So it's like this assumption that like you always know what your partner's doing, and like you always go with them. It's yeah.
It's a side effect of amatonormativity for sure.
Totally.
Just catching up on a couple of things in chat here. Lore Curator mentioned also finding people I consider to be family helped me to learn to like myself and enjoy my own company more. Something that wasn't going to happen necessarily in romantic relationships. So true. Forrest Emlyn Reed said, what a beautiful way of wording that. And they've never been comfy with the idea of having to love yourself before you can be loved. Their folks have shown them that they're worthy of love and having joy in so many ways that they could not have found on their own. Such great points that you're both bringing up. Ciro said heteronormative, more like heteroperformative.
Nice.
Laura mentioned for my wedding, I mentioned to folks I knew who were poly to let me know if they needed extra seats. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to make that, plus one more inclusive and more accommodating for all kinds of relationships, other than the one that you assume to be the relationship. I also knew right away that my one friend needed 3 seats for her 2 partners and their child. So I made sure she knew they were welcome. That's what Laura mentioned. And that's so heartwarming. And, it's really just about being aware that not everybody wants to or will try to fit within the mold of a metanormative context. And so being aware of that and trying to be mindful when you're sending out those invites is just so important, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Joe mentioned, I know my nesting partner and I often do things separately. And folks found it strange that uh, they'd bring friends instead of each other. And that's just one frustrating example of the metanormative assumption, is that you will do everything with your romantic partner. And if you don't, then that's weird. And why aren't you doing that? And it's so frustrating because not
Hmm.
everybody in a romantic relationship wants to do everything with their partner, even within a metanormative context. But
True.
that's what we're told. That's what society tells us we must do.
Hmm. Yeah, if I want, like, if I'm inviting people and I want, like, if there is a couple and I want both of them there, I'll invite both of them. Like, for me, it's a no-brainer, but you know, there's and I won't assume they'll both come. Like, maybe one person will come, maybe the other will, like, yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have these sorts of discussions to challenge these societal norms around what the term relationship means and many of these things that society takes for granted. And then when you start to actually stop and think about it, you realize that it all comes unraveling if you give it more than a few seconds of thought.
Hmm.
But I think, many of us in, aspec spaces, obviously, as well as polyamorous spaces, have had to make these sorts of, have these sorts of discussions and hard thoughts long before, we came to discuss them on a podcast. So we've been thinking about them, these sorts of things, much longer than, say, the average person society would be. So I recognize that, but that's why the podcast is here, to get people to challenge those societal norms around terms like relationship and plus one, single, and question what they actually mean.
I thought of another example too, just really quickly. Like, I've had people invite me to things and say, "Oh, so and so can come too," and like they assume that's like my plus one, but then I'm like, and it's always awkward when it's like, actually, can I invite this other person instead? I think they'll really like it, and they're really close to me, and you almost have to prove that they're like important to you. Um, Usually people agree, but it's like it's still that awkward, like, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. Such a good point that you brought up.
Or maybe you want to bring both of those people in, and then it's
Exactly.
always like, am I allowed to do that? Like,
So true. And yes,
mhm.
deconstruct all of this nonsense. It all links back to capitalism, the patriarchy, all of it's interrelated, for sure. Build
Mhm.
the future we want to see. Having discussions like this are absolutely, a great place to start that sort of work. So, what I might do, just to, um, just so we don't run out of time here to talk before we get hit with ads, I might run an ad break a little bit early, give us a little bit of a break. I'll go get some more water. And
Mhm.
then we can come back and
Everyone
think
drink your
about, yeah, absolutely, hydrate or dihydrate, or as some people say, die straight.
water.
And then we can come back and kind of circle back to, more about amatonormativity. Does
Mhm.
that sound all right?
Sounds good.
All right, so we'll see you back in a few minutes then.
Don't run away.
All right, welcome back, folks. Thanks for sticking around. So, kind of circling back, I mean, amatonormativity has been a big theme throughout the talk, but kind of going into this in a little bit more detail, amatonormativity presumes that by virtue of not being in a romantic relationship, you're destined to suffer from loneliness. Because under amatonormative pretenses, the only relationship that matters is the one that's romantic partnered and consummated through marriage. And therefore, if you're not in one, well, you must be lonely. And I, as a aromantic person, know that this is absolutely not true. And I've found, in my case, ample joy and connection through the communities in which I associate and the, many kinds of relationships and platonic friendships that I've formed. Are you able to comment on how your chosen family has brought you, meaningful connections and why we aren't doomed to die alone simply because we're not in a romantic partnership?
Absolutely. I would love to talk about that. So I touched a little bit on it earlier with like the chosen family and community stuff, but I'll delve a little bit deeper. So, like when you are in a amatonormative type relationship, like a singular person that is the most important out of everyone, it's almost like, I feel like to me it's almost riskier because what happens if that person gets really sick or passes away early, or they cheat on you and leave, or whatever. Like all these things could happen, and then you're left with nothing. So it's like, I think it's very important to build chosen family even if you do have romantic partnerships. And to me it's like a bigger safety net, and it's like a no-brainer, right? Because that way, if one person is struggling and someone else can't step up because they're struggling, like there's always somebody else that can help in ways that they're able to. Similarly for things like holidays, if you like, I personally, I like being alone on holidays, but if people struggle with that, then a chosen family can be someone to spend holidays with. And if one person's busy, maybe other people are available. So it's great to have that sort of network of people. And personally, I've benefited greatly from such connections, and I'm very happy, and I feel more secure and like more, I don't know what to call it, like myself and stable in that kind of network, rather than kind of relying on like a singular person. And because that can be very destabilizing if something happens, you break up, or the worst. So yeah, it's let's see what I have in my notes here. I had a few more points. Yeah, and it goes back to like that mutual aid point as well. And sometimes it can be something as small as like cooking a meal for someone when they're having a bad day, or something as big as like coming together as a group to help someone with like a medical expense. Like there's so many different ways, and like together as a chosen family you can share the burden, as opposed to just like putting it all on one person and then like struggling. I don't know. I hope that made sense.
Absolutely makes sense. And you brought up a really good point, and I've participated in recently here on Twitch. I've donated to a couple, but I've also participated as a fundraiser in a mutual aid raid train where somebody had their pupper was really ill and needed emergency vet support. And many of us who are both queer and disabled, it's very difficult to afford those sorts of things, and we don't have the ability to have insurance for these sorts of things. So instead of you know one or two people being, having to share that, expense burden. We spread it across a whole supportive community instead. Through $5 here, $5 there, we were able to raise, over $2,000, which is absolutely amazing to think about.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and I've seen that happen, in other communities as well. And it just, it goes to show like we are all one family, and like we should be more interconnected and interdependent, and take care of one another, and not just be in our insular little nuclear family where it's like, me and my own, and like nobody else matters. So
100%. And kind of thinking back to holidays, I find it so difficult when long weekends roll around. Because for the longest time, it's like, what the heck am I going to do for the next 3 days? And so having things, like Friendsgiving, or, those more, alternative kind of holidays are so important, and they mean so, so much. I've also heard of Friendsmas, for example.
mm-hmm.
And those sorts of events are great. Sorry?
Palantir.
Palentines, yeah, absolutely. I participated in a few different Palentines events. We actually had a whole episode about Palentine's Day, or I participated in a Twitch raid train where we talked about the importance of alt events like Palentine's. I went on a very long rant about amatonormativity during it, but also talked about some examples where I've participated in Palentine's events with some folks in the Ace and Arrow and other broader 2S LGBTQI plus communities, and just how amazing they can be.
Totally. Yeah, I also wanted to add as well, like for people, again, for a lot of queer and trans folk, their family of origin is not like necessarily a safe space to celebrate holidays at. So just having that chosen family is super important in those times as well. And also for other reasons, like maybe their, biological family or family of origin can't support them financially for whatever reason. They can't offer a place to sleep, and etc. So it's really good it's extra important to have that network of people. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, so true. Joe mentioned, I know in a lot of mental health circles, there was such a huge focus on self-care. And it's not to say that self-care practices aren't important, but also kind of, recognizing that mutual care is so important and brings, more stability than, self-care on its own can potentially bring. And so having that extra level of, support network and community behind you is so, so incredibly important.
Good point. Yeah.
Such a good
There's
point.
a lot of like individualism in this, Western capitalistic society where it's like, you kind of have to suck it up and deal with it on your own, or like, yeah.
Mutual aid radically pushes against that in so many great ways.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Oh, I just thought of one more point with
Yeah.
that, with the like dying alone aspect. Like, if your community or chosen family or network, whatever you have or you label it, if it has people from different age groups and generations as well, I think that's super important. Not just for like things like mentorship and having like role models, but also in terms of like taking care of one another, as people are aging, or as, there's like children being born, like just having that community of different age ranges to help each other with different problems, you know? I think it's really, really great. Mhm.
Absolutely. Such and such a good point, for sure. So something that comes up frequently here on the podcast, and I know that we mentioned, or you mentioned it when we were kind of chatting about this podcast and planning for it, was relationship anarchy. And I'll pop that in the chat here for folks that may not be familiar with the term. Basically, it's a term to describe a anti-hierarchical relationship philosophy that rejects societal norms around relationships. It was coined by Andy Nordgren. I think was it 2006 during their um, uh,
Don't
short
remember the exact.
instructional manifesto for relationship anarchy, which I've linked there.
Mm.
There's a couple of videos there. I can also link as well. Great to see you as always, Laura. Hope therapy goes well, and I'm so glad that you've enjoyed the conversation. See you around.
Yeah.
And I think, many folks, beyond even, polyamorous spaces, and I know that not all polyamory folks that practice polyamory are relationship anarchists and vice versa. But I know
Mhm.
that many folks in ace and arrow spaces find a connection to relationship anarchy, at least on some level.
Mhm.
And I think, I wanted to ask how you incorporate relationship anarchy into some of your relationships.
Yeah. Awesome. So you already defined it for me, so thank you. um, but yeah, I just wanted to also like reiterate that relationship anarchy is a philosophy, not so much a relationship style. It's based on anarchist principles, and it's kind of like a way of decolonizing relationships, I would say, from the you know hetero amato normative, I don't know, there's other words in there, capitalistic view of relationships. And I think it actually meshes really well with aspec and aromantic people, because one of the kind of key aspects of relationship anarchy is that romantic relationships are not assumed to be more important than platonic ones. So it kind of dismantles that idea. And in a more rigid structure of relationships where it's like, you know, this is a romantic relationship, this is what you're allowed to do, and this is what you have to do, and then this is a platonic relationship, you can't do this, you can only do this. There's all these like prescriptive definitions of relationships, whereas relationship anarchy says no, no, forget all that, you can define your own relationships. And there's a great tool called the relationship anarchy smorgasbord. It's like a big chart of different aspects of relationships, and you can pick and choose, whatever ones align with, each individual person, and with like you could have that discussion with people in your life and decide like, hey, like, let's do this but not that, or there's no rules for like this is what a relationship looks like. So yeah, going back to the question, how does that relate to, what was it, my chosen family, or I already forgot the question.
Yeah, it can be, how do you incorporate relationship anarchy into your relationships within your, or, within your chosen family as well, more broadly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, going back to like the smorgasbord and not prioritizing certain relationships over others by default. Obviously, you can prioritize some people over others if you mutually agree on that, but that's a different story. That's like a conscious decision rather than like a social default or assumed direction of a relationship. But so you could have, like, in theory, for relationship anarchy, you can have two people platonically raising a child, like two people in a platonic relationship decide to raise a child, or you can have like a cuddle buddy that you watch movies with, but not necessarily do anything else with, or you can have you can co-own a home with some friends, and there's just so many different combinations. You can have an asexual romantic relationship, or an aromantic sexual relationship, or any kind of combination is fine in relationship anarchy. And there is overlap, like you mentioned, with polyamory, but you can be RA and not poly. You can be poly and not RA. It's kind of it allows for a lot of different and interesting, I would say, combinations. And chosen family obviously fits great into that structure because there's different people in my chosen family. I have different types of connections with, like, maybe with some I go on vacation sometimes, or with others it's like we chat every day in the group chat, or there's like different types. There's not like, oh, this person's a partner, that means this person is a friends with benefits, that's this. Like, it's more fluid than that, and it can change, and you can discuss it not just at the beginning but throughout, so you can change things in the relationships, of course, but it's not fixed. So
yeah, that's absolutely a huge part of relationship anarchy, is recognizing that no one relationship has to be fixed and the rules are set in stone forever. A big part of Andy Nordgren's relationship anarchy philosophy is that you're always communicating, and communication is key to discussing and defining what that relationship looks like in the first place, but also what you might want to change down the road. So
yeah,
communication
and
is huge.
in a traditional, like, a meta-normative context, it's just assumed, like, okay, you're dating and then you commit, and then you maybe move in together, you get engaged, you get married. There's like the relationship escalator, whereas for relationship anarchy there's no such like assumption. Like, you kind of have to talk about it throughout, so that everyone's on the same page. And if you meet a new person, say, and you have this chosen family already, you're not going to suddenly throw them out the window. Like, a common problem I find in aromantic spaces is that people have a close friend, and then that friend meets a romantic partner, and then suddenly they start hearing less and less from them, and they just drift apart, and it's like, what happened? Aren't I important? So with relationship anarchy, there is still this sense of responsibility to people close to you. It's not like anything goes, like, too bad. If a new person enters the picture, I let them know, like, hey, these are the people important to me. I'm not going to start spending less time with them just because I met you. Like, they this is what they mean to me. They're my chosen family. They come first. Not and, like, maybe after some time, after a couple years, maybe that person will be part of my chosen family, but it's not a default thing, like, oh, just because this is romantic or just because you're dating, like, you suddenly get this infinite time and infinite priority. So
It's intentional, and it rejects the societal assumptions. It's all about intentionality and customizing it for what works for you and the relationships in your life. So absolutely.
yeah.
So you mentioned solo polyamory earlier, and that's a term that I'm not super familiar with. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, what solely polyamory means?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, I don't know the standardized definition, but I'll just say my understanding because I know a lot of people in the community argue on specific points, and but basically, it means you are not looking for a primary partner, and that again has different definitions for different people. But typically, solo poly people will not prioritize one person above everyone else. They try to be more non-hierarchical. Usually, they don't get married or merge their lives with anyone. There's a lot of argument whether you can have someone that lives with you if you're solo poly or not. And I think it depends. But again, it's like that person doesn't take priority. You're not, it might be a temporary situation. You might be, move out and live with someone else. Like, so it's just having that kind of, it's like saying, I'm not looking for the one. I don't want that. And I'm happy having multiple intimate or close relationships with people. But yeah, it's typically you're not like in a like unit as like a couple with anybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say it's also a non-hierarchical type of polyamory?
Yeah, I would say so, although it differs from relationship anarchy a bit in that it still focuses on amory, it still focuses on romantic relationships, and it still focuses on like, okay, partners are more important than friends. I don't like that aspect of it. But yeah, within, your relationships, there isn't one that takes priority over everyone else typically. So it's non-hierarchical in that sense. But the way I practice it is that I do have platonic partners or close friends that I prioritize equally with, romantic partners. And yeah, it's just it's however you want to um, uh, incorporate different principles like relationship anarchy into it. I guess.
Absolutely, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and totally I can understand it being a little different for everybody for that, very
Mhm.
reason. But thank you so much for you know, describing it a little bit because it's not a term I had come across before, and I don't think we've ever talked about it before specifically on the podcast. We've only ever mentioned relationship anarchy, so I
Mhm.
appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
So
There.
that's kind of it for questions that I have. Was
Mhm.
there anything else you wanted to discuss or reflect on a little bit more?
Yeah, let me look at my notes and see if I missed anything. I mean, yeah, some of these topics I can discuss for hours, but um, yeah, I also wrote that for solo polyamory, you don't get those legal or societal advantages of marriage or common law. So you still write single on your tax documents, and um, typically, yeah, you don't get like work benefits or anything from your partners or your close people. So, and a lot of, not all, but those who can afford it, solo poly people live alone. I have lived alone and I loved it, but I can't currently afford that. So, it's not a requirement. People will argue, for days like, oh, you have to live alone if you're solo. And it's like, no, no, you don't have to. Yeah. And I do have a closing thought, but I don't know if you had anything else to add.
No, nothing for me, I don't think.
Yeah, so I just wrote that, for anyone watching who's maybe younger or, I don't know, kind of new to all this and um, still discovering themselves and different labels and frameworks and everything. And yeah, it can be a lot. But I just want to encourage you to just stay true to yourself, hold your ground, live the life you want to live in, and the relationships you want to have. Because what's worse than being completely alone is being stuck in a horrible, abusive, toxic relationship. Um, so definitely, yeah, try to stay true to yourself and honest with other people, and respect your own boundaries. And as someone who has sort of been identified with these various labels for like 15 years now, and people will keep telling you like, oh, you'll change your mind, you'll find the one, this is just a phase, oh, you're just in, you're like, yeah, you're just young and having fun, and like people will tell you that, but then here I am on the other side, and you know if you stay true to yourself, if you know who you are and don't listen to what other people's opinions and what society has to say about you and your relationships, you'll be fine and you won't die alone.
I went on the longest rant for sure back in February about that, very thought that, you will find you have to find the one. You absolutely don't. And you know yourself better than anybody else. You know what you want. You know what you want, and nobody else can tell you that, what you are looking for other than you. So,
Mhm.
such a good point. And I just want to say thank you so much again for chatting with us today about chosen family, about relationship anarchy, you know, teaching me about, the term solely polyamory and what it means. Because I don't think many of us here in the channel would have ever heard of it before. So thank you so
Mhm.
much again for chatting. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun,
Yeah,
and I stumbled through some of those answers, but
no worries.
got there.
It's just a discussion, it's just a chat.
And thanks for I can't see the Twitch chat, but thank you for those who joined that as well and
Absolutely.
commented. Really lovely. Yeah.
And Forrest Demlin Reed said, "Thank you both so much for this space. Just what I needed and such a terrific discussion. It was an absolutely wonderful discussion. Thank you so much again to everyone that came out today, that contributed in the chat, that lurked, that was hanging out. It's been a lot of fun. And
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting to be on this podcast.
absolutely. And next month, April 6th, is International Asexuality Day. So hopefully try to host a podcast as close to that date as possible. I don't know if it will be on the 6th itself. It'll have to depend on my work schedule because starting that week is final exams at the university. And as an exam proctor, my exam proctoring schedule is going to be absolutely wild. So I may have to have a podcast a little off of April 6th, but we'll do our best to try to host something as close to IAD as possible. Thank you so much again. And at this point, I think we'll go on a
Thank you.
raid.